Good evening, everyone. We're back at it tonight. This is Jeff. We got Jim and Timothy here. Say hello, guys.
Howdy,
Howdy.
We are ready to kick this thing and have another good podcast of talking about why the heck we as human beings are here on the planet. If you haven't tuned in, this is a little plug for the last 5 podcasts we've done. Pretty darn cool. I'm telling you, we're having a lot of fun here. And I hope that this is both relevant, entertaining, and informative. If we can weave all that together, then we're having some fun and doing a good job and stimulating some brain cells out there in the ether space. Then we would consider this a success. Don't want to do any backtracking. You're going to have to go out there and find it on your own. But you're darn close. If you found this one, the others aren't far away. With regard to where we've already been and where we are tonight. So I've asked both Jim and Timothy to be mindful between our sessions or our meetings. We're meeting once a week to record these things and have all this fun. To be aware of what it is that God or the universe or the great white buffalo or some mermaid whispers in our ear during the week of what would be relevant to spin into this topic that we're kicking around of why are we here? Tonight, why are we here? I'm calling what I got, the download or the big whisper in the ear was Earth U, Earth University. So we're here taking courses. We plan these in advance and we're in kindergarten, some of us, and some of us are in graduate school, and some of us are here to play all these different roles that are required for us to have these different experiences that we're having. In my week to week, which one week isn't that different from the next in my world, I see probably 20 to 30, 35 patients at the most each week, so lots and lots of hours spent in the office grinding away, people walking in the door, bringing in issues, most of which they think shouldn't be happening in their life. They're trying to come to terms with why stuff is showing up the way it is for them in their life, and most of them are stuck to their story that they think that some other experience should be showing up other than the one that they're having. So I spend a lot of time helping people accept where they are, what's going on, why it's going on, and then what is there to learn from it. So that's where I'd like to pick up and keep going with tonight, is this notion that we literally are here day by day, moment by moment, event by event, working on these lessons, lots and lots and lots of lessons. And it takes a group, a community, a family, a society to pull all of this off. There are many scholars right now that are writing about this metaphysics thing and these rapid changes that are taking place on the planet, that we can get as many as 4 lifetimes lived in what used to just be able to be done in one lifetime, that there are enough changes happening within one lifetime, one 80-year span. Society's changing that much, rules, just societal expectations. Just think about it. If you went back 80 years ago, that is such a different place than it is today. They didn't have the ability to choose which bathroom you want to go into on a day-by-day basis, and just so much more that's acceptable and commonplace today would have been heresy or hypocrisy or something years ago. So in some regard, it seems like we're living in a kinder, more gentler, accepting place, and in other regards we haven't changed much at all. But regardless of all that, the ability to come here to the planet and have such a wide range of possibilities and experiences, both from the most noble to the most criminal, and apparently God doesn't seem to care. He told me that himself. He visited me yesterday. I'm joking, but there are many, many people I'm working with that are of the opinion that we get this free will thing is really a cool process that we get to choose and guide and dictate of, you want to have this experience? God's like, hey, I'm down for that. We'll set up the requirements and create the variables, and it unfolds. And did you learn something from it? And was that in keeping with your guardian angels and your spirit guides and the contracts you made before coming here. And if not, then guess what? You get to do it again, perhaps. And maybe it won't be in this lifetime. But apparently there are structured, programmatic, life-loving lessons that we're here to experience. And sometimes we're just here watching. We get to watch it a few times. Just like when I was going through flight school, most of the lessons in the beginning were demos, and you just kind of watched. And then little by little, you got to grab the stick and the throttle, and you got to push some buttons, and before you know it, hey, I know how to do this. And then the scary part was, okay, we think you know how to do this well enough alone. You get to go do it by yourself. You're like, oh my gosh, but if something goes wrong, I could die. But anyway, it was interesting. Hey, I watched a movie this past week, the new Jumanji movie, and I love how Hollywood will just burst an idea into my head. So, it's a redo of a movie that was made 20-something years ago, or maybe longer. I'm dating myself. But the new version had, the game players had 3 stripes on their arm. They show up in the game with 3 tattooed stripes. Each stripe represented a life they got to live in the game. And as they got run over by rhinos or eaten by a crocodile or fell out of a helicopter, they would lose one of their lives. When it came down to each of them having just 1 stripe left, there was this key quote that it just, bam, it struck me like a bell. And one of the guys said to the other, when it's for real and you know that this is your last one, you're not as willing to take risks and just kind of hang it out there and let her rip. I could be a hero when I had 2 or 3 lives because I knew all that would happen is, bloop, I'm right back in this thing. And that's how the movie had it. Like, they'd get eaten by a crocodile, and then some noise would happen, and they'd come sailing back in through, the atmosphere, and they'd land right back kind of where they started, except, the alligator's gone, and they get to continue on. But isn't that an interesting notion that there was this, wow, I can be the hero and do all these amazing things, but now that I only have this last life to live, I'm really cautious, and I'm playing it like, I'm not so bold and daring. And it's just interesting because it was the same character and it was the same movie and the same scenario, but this conscious awareness of, no, I'm not going to be so bold and daring and adventurous. And I thought that was really interesting because, what if we're kind of thinking, there's only this one, and I have to be really cautious and go slow and not make any mistakes because Daddy might be mad at me and I get spanked and get sent to the prongy place where, bad things happen to me forever. That was in a past episode. Sorry, guys. I digress. But anyway, you could tell that movie played with my head quite a bit, and I'm sharing it with you guys. So I'm going to stop for a moment. That was our intro for tonight, and let you guys catch up or resonate, jump in here. Anything that tripped your trigger, or you're like, yeah, that was interesting, Jeff, but I want to talk about this instead. I'm open for anything.
Yes, you are. I had an experience many years ago because I had sort of come through that whole idea and process of this sort of we're here to learn lessons sort of thing, and realized, at least for me, that became a very self-limiting concept because it was in diametric opposition to a lot of what the Eastern cultures talk about, and free will and create your own reality and all of that type of stuff. That I think I ascribe to the idea that we have an intention coming to this experience. There are things that this unique package has the ability to stimulate and create in the environment and create within the self, and so I kind of see almost like more like a guideline, not even like guideline, but like this is sort of the essence of, this is the intention of this life. I want to, I'm choosing these parents to go into this experience that's going to set me up for this progression potentially, but because the free will is involved, any number of things can happen on that path, because if it's prescribed, then point A and point B are in place, and I don't know that I think that that's true. I think that there's there's tendencies, there's predominant energies, there's not so dominant energies, and depending on how you interact with your environment as you move through your life will depend on how those tendencies and abilities are stimulated. Because you always have choice. I think about going through my life, and I was sharing this. I was giving a ride to a woman a couple days ago, and she was, as passengers are wont to do, they want to dive into my personal life as deeply as they possibly can. It's just the strangest thing I've ever seen in my life, to get in a stranger's car and then ask them deeply personal questions about their life. But anyway, and I'm never shy about it.
They walk away and
it's over. Yeah. So and I don't have any problem with it. It just makes
and that
me
might
laugh.
be the only place they're getting it. So
right.
yeah.
So she begins this questioning process, and so I was sharing with her what had occurred in my experience, which I think you and I have talked about, in 2009, when I went through a divorce and cancer and losing the house and blah blah blah. And I was telling her the story, and she says, "Wow, you talk about it like it was no big deal." And I said, "Well, because it was probably the most extraordinary time of my life." And she was like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Because I got to watch 25 years of my life completely disintegrate. That was remarkable to me."
Mm-hmm.
When I got diagnosed, I knew the minute I got diagnosed why I got diagnosed. There was no question in my mind exactly how that got in my body.
Huh.
And
I've heard others speak.
there was a minute.
Similarly,
I mean,
yeah.
there was. I can't say there wasn't a minute when I had some tears and I called my mom and then I went, duh, So, but that particular moment had so many potential outcomes that could have taken place as a result of that, which would have sent my life on trajectories that are nothing like what they are now. So the idea that it's sort of prescribed lesson is a struggle for me, because that confines the experience, and I don't know that that's really what it's about, personally.
What I'm hearing so far is we're kind of saying the same thing, but maybe in just slightly different ways.
Language.
So everything that I don't disagree with anything that you've said. Maybe it might be the specificity. For example, I heard you say you learned the lessons of loss. You learned how to deal with loss through those experiences. And those are profoundly powerful lessons to learn. The loss of a spouse, the loss of potentially life or health, or those sorts of things. And to me, those would be lessons. But it's hard to do life without having to...
I've never thought about it that way. Never.
Which way?
Never thought about it that way. I never thought about those experiences as losses. It was change. It was...
Okay.
It was...
Well, then it was a lesson of change, but there's some...
Everything that you knew for 25 years, I don't know how you worded it, but...
Disintegrated.
Okay.
Literally everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
The lesson of disintegration.
Okay. Is that a better word? Disintegration than loss?
Well, because I guess I'm associating the idea of loss as... I have the same problem with people dying. It's very hard for me to say I'm sorry for your loss, because I don't see that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just a
understand.
Right?
I
So
understand.
it's the same thing. It's like...
It's on to the next.
Loss.
Mm.
Well, loss implies that it was important to me in a way that I was attached, in a way that I had to have it to be okay. Somehow. And what I saw was, wow, what's happening that my life is taking this direction? Well, I know what created this. I know how I created this. Now I'm not sure where it's going from here. So all I can do is keep walking in the direction that the energy's moving,
Sure.
which is away from that and into something else, but I don't know what the something else is. And maybe that could be construed, that could also be determined as a lesson, of faith and trust, of staying true to who I am and staying dialed into that experience. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that, because it doesn't, I don't think like that. So it's it makes it a little more challenging to come back around. But it's interesting. Yeah. It's interesting to come back around to it and say, So if I look at that as loss, if I think of that in terms of learning about loss, I'm not even sure where to go with it from there.
So there's some aspect of learning involved with what you went through, whether it was loss,
Oh, heck yeah.
attachment, flow, something. That's
Heck
really,
yeah.
we were talking more about learning than we were what you were learning. It was the idea of lessons and learning and process and just being here and being cool with knowing that whether we set it up in advance or there is some divine intervention or it's just make of it what you will, there does seem to be some learning involved in doing this. And it's good.
Yeah, I was thinking about the relationship with clients and the things that we talk about in regard to their own evolution or their own process. And the reason I was thinking about it was in terms of as they confront different aspects of their experience or as they come into understanding of different aspects of their experience, do I see that as lessons or do I see that as evolutionary process or spiritual growth or are they different? I don't know. I'm just positing that. But it's interesting that I don't find that thought process, that it may be something they brought in with them to sort through.
Mm-hmm.
That I'll say frequently. You know, this is because what you get to see is the concurrent themes that go on, especially when you work with people over weeks and months. You begin to see the threads of the things they bring with everything they do.
Right.
And so over the course of that's when it becomes even more more clear, I guess, that there are these threads, and some of the threads aren't specific to their behavior necessarily. No, specific to their life experience, I think I want to say. I think of it in terms of I had a client, a devout Jewish client, who was stuck in this paradigm that he was trying to understand, and part of it I think had to do with this mantle of suffering, or this mantle of the things that sort of make up the culture or the underpinnings of the Jewish faith.
Mm-hmm.
And those were things that he adopted as a part of his belief system that were in direct opposition to what his life experience showed him. And so he was at a point where he was evaluating what it was to be a man, but what it was to be a man was in diametric opposition to itself, because his experience of himself and his experience of himself within his culture were completely different. And so he was trying to come to terms with that was the crisis for him.
Okay.
Was sifting that, was some of it, not the whole picture, but part of it was sifting through that particular aspect of it.
I have a suggestion. What if we come here to have these experiences synonymously with lessons? And if you don't like lessons, then we can just talk about.
Well,
we definitely
use
come
whatever
here for
word you
these
choose to. It
experiences.
doesn't. I mean, I can pick different words too, but it doesn't. It isn't necessarily about changing language, but you ask the question, and that's what stuck out for me.
Mm-hmm.
Was the idea that.
So does it all make sense that we're having these experiences?
Yeah.
That life is about all these different experiences, and as humans, we have this program that we create patterns. We recognize patterns, and generally, you're thought to have a higher IQ or higher intelligence if you can do this thing called pattern recognition, and you could somewhat predict. If I put my hand on the hot stove, I'm probably going to say ouch, and it's probably going to have a blister. So I probably only need to do that once. Or maybe I can learn from my sister doing it. I don't know.
There was a video today of another group, the Tide Pod group,
Yeah?
now doing
They're burning their hands on the
themselves,
stove? Cool. That's not... I'm not down for that. Okay? I've had enough
You're not condoning
this
that.
year.
the. Sorry, it's so funny that you said it, and I just remembered that I actually saw that today and went, what?
So at what point do we weave learning into these experiences that we're having?
So we're talking about wisdom, essentially.
Oh, I like that word. Yeah.
Okay.
That was it?
Good night, everybody. I was just
Thank you for
parlaying into your whatever you were going for. So this idea of adding what we've learned to future behavior is okay. So I'm tracking. That's all I was getting at. I call that wisdom.
Yeah, I think what just occurred to me is I think my response to the lesson piece is that I think what happened for me was the realization that as long as I looked at it that way, it was going to be a hard thing. It was going to be a God's a taskmaster, and I'm here to learn lessons, and how am I doing? And there's a scorecard, and there's a balance sheet, and there's a
Sounds like one of the books we all know pretty well.
yeah, and I'm like, no, that's so limiting.
Yeah.
You know, because for those of us that didn't like school that much, that would suck. You know, it's like
Yeah.
I didn't like school all that.
I didn't
much,
like
so.
school, but I don't mind lessons. I think it's one of the great joys. I think that we repeat patterns until we get those lessons. That shows up replete on the table with my clients all the time. Once they understand the beauty, no matter what it is that they're going through, once they understand that, they if they get the lesson, that particular pattern, that nuance of that pattern tends to dissipate.
Sure.
Yeah. Which goes to, if that's being checked off of a great list somewhere, you know, might just be within, but if they're not consciously saying, I'm going to get this lesson so I don't have to deal with that anymore, psychically, when that happens, it goes. And those kinds of things are pretty exciting to me, just to see like how each person going through completely different set of circumstances, when that lesson, when that bell rings of that lesson, they're on to other things to learn. So there must be something about getting.
If we're thinking, if we've talked about this a little bit before, which is this whole idea that everything is energy. So what if actually what's happening is congruence? That what you're seeing, if you think of it in energetic terms, is that their energy went from incongruent to congruent, because now their inner and their outer are aligned, or their upper and their lower are aligned, whichever way you want to look at it.
And how much of that has to do with victimization narratives?
Well, that's coming back to the original story.
Right.
The story is what does the damage.
Big time.
Very little of the effect is caused. I mean, there's an emotional impact, but the story is what continues the damage, and the continuation of that story, adding to over and over. Blah, blah, blah. But there's but those stories to me seem to. That's where we go in and out of alignment, in and out of a congruence with our core energy experiences. If I'm attached to this story, that story has an energy that's going to pull me in a direction that may not be where I resonate well. You know.
But what percentage of the planet do you think is even familiar with a particular higher resonance of themselves? You know what I mean? I feel you. I follow you. I like to think about broad spectrum who all will understand this. And
well, clearly, it's only the three of us.
Absolutely.
And the people who are listening to our podcast.
Yeah.
We're it.
Yeah.
So maybe 10?
No. 10 people? Yeah. It seems like an extraordinary low number of people tend to be asking themselves about what frequency they could be tuning into. And
REM had that song, What's the Frequency, Kenneth? So, you know, they started
they
that
got
15
it. They got it
years
going
ago
on.
or something like that.
I think if more were having that conversation, their lives would change
Big time.
dramatically,
Big
quickly,
time.
and with a lot less effort.
Because just that awareness, just that subtle awareness, that conscious observation of thought and of action and most people they're so caught up in just like the next turn of, they don't realize that they can just look at all this. They can just look at all this and just observe it the way they see the clouds in the sky, and not have that attachment going. And that seems to be, and I think I spoke of this before, but that seems to be one of the biggest ways that we're failing kids, is not teaching them simple techniques like that, of ways to ground themselves and to be observant of and conscious and compassionate observers of what they're witnessing, and coming from that place, and not thinking that that thought or that little addictive narrative is fully defining them. Like realizing, oh wow, my ego's really active right now. It's going nuts. And I'll ask people all the time when they say, well, I'm uncomfortable. Well, is your soul uncomfortable right now? Is your body uncomfortable? Is your ego uncomfortable? But when I say ego, people usually figure out that that's what's been jacking with them. Did that peter out?
It was done.
That was done. Did all she could.
Yeah.
So I want to tell a story.
Do it!
So this story would be an example of a possible reason someone would come here to have an experience that would give them an opportunity to learn to accept and love themselves, which may be the lesson that we're to learn, and we get to experience it in such a wide variety of ways that we have an ability to really, truly love ourselves, no matter who we're with, where we are, what life we're in, what society we're in. Let's say, for example, kid shows up to a family, little boy, and within a year, dad takes off. Deadbeat dad just hits the road, and somehow the mom is bad-mouthing the dad, and the little kid grows up thinking that dads are jerks, and was told that, he's not worth a dad hanging around and raising him and teaching him how to throw a ball and kiss a girl and all that stuff that, dads are handy to role model and
So I've been told.
And teach us. So this kid believes that he's not lovable, that he's not worth, somebody sticking around to do this. So he believes that. His story starts to get written of, I'm not important, I'm not lovable, I'm not acceptable, I'm not worthy. And guess what starts showing up? Like everywhere he looks. Mm-hmm. Like everywhere he looks. Teachers are going to respond that way. His friends are going to respond that way. The police officers he's going to get to meet are going to respond that way, right? Until one day he's in jail and somebody hands him a book and he learns to meditate and he learns to chill and, begins to believe that, I came to the planet whole and complete. There wasn't one thing wrong with me.
Exactly.
And somebody guides him through the process of going back to the beginning to realize you set all this up in advance and you came here to have this experience. And can you actually love yourself even though bump, 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 bump. Stop comparing yourself to everybody else. This is a unique snowflake, a one-off experience that it's beautiful, it's divine, it's perfect. And can you actually accept that you're whole and complete, lacking nothing, you're lovable, acceptable? If you show up in a way that's compassionate and kind and thoughtful and understanding, and that's, to me, that story has a happy ending. If there's a turning point to where somebody hits bottom or they run into somebody that can give them a wake-up call. And those things happen in prison. There are some good stories that come out of places like that, or boot camps, or wherever, cults.
Right.
So that's one example to me of a life that was by design created and set up that way and set in motion, and those events happen. But what's interesting is it would take a loving guy to play the role of the deadbeat dad. And that's what we sometimes don't consider, is that for that boy to have that experience and to have it really play out, exactly everything needed to be that way, including the guy who was going to show up and be the jerk dad, right?
Right.
And that's actually an act of love. And that's a huge turning point that I get to see in my practice, where I ask people to consider, do you know how much your dad actually loved you to show up for you that way? People are like, what? You're crazy.
Yeah, you're
Jeff.
ruining
You've
my
lost
narrative.
it." Exactly. You know, I'm stuck. You're trying to help me rewrite my story. I don't want that. I want my story.
Yeah.
I want my story the way it was.
Yeah.
Leave it alone. I'm like, okay, you can have your story.
Mm-hmm.
It's your hell. You can stay there if you want. So that's kind of fun to help people get to the point where they can see, oh, everything is showing up for me the way that it's supposed to, so that I can keep going either with my story or I can change my story. But I love the idea, and you've mentioned it before, Jim, of this idea that we're whole and complete, we're lacking nothing. We just have to unlearn what we've learned, relearn what we've learned.
Yeah.
Do you guys dig the part about there had to be the deadbeat dad, and that's a divine role that he's playing?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's that whole co-creative process. You know, that we pick the field we want to play in, and we pick it because it sets the stage for any number of possibilities, but the possibilities of whatever it is we came to explore in largest. But I still wonder, because there's the idea of karma, which fuels a lot of the reincarnational life after life sort of storyline,
Right.
that that a lot of what brings us back is actually the karmic issues, those things that, I mean, I'm struggling because I see that a little differently, but the karma, the karmic implication is what goes around comes around, essentially. You know, that your actions cause equal or whatever reactions. And so it's those events in our humanness that create those circumstances, or create those continuing stories that cause the sort of rubber band effect. You know, gotta come back, because the personality hasn't resolved something that's strong enough in the energy system that even when they try to go back, it pulls them back into the environment. It pulls them back because energetically it has to resolve. Congruence, resolution, transformation, whatever you want to call it, that's all part of the same picture, I think. But I find that I forget where I was going with that.
While you recovered that.
Yeah, please.
So I'm on board with this idea of co-creating, and I think the power that can come into a child's life to some distant North Star that they don't know really existed, but something I think we all spoke in our last conversation about, something was speaking to us, that we had an inner drive. Where did you get that? I don't really know where I got that, but I'm okay with the idea of co-creating, like that child co-creating something. I don't necessarily, again, we're getting into a little bit of a particular kind of faith, of just believing that I chose all of that. There's times when I really like the way that sounds and really like the way that feels, but I just don't have enough inherent resonance with that particular concept to just jump on board and say I'm down for it. The same way about divine creator. Just because we have divinity and how we can create doesn't necessarily lend itself to the idea that there's a divine creator. So the idea that I chose everything the way that I did, I don't know that I had that, or some other souls that were figuring out karma at the time had something to do with it. I don't really know. I don't have a clue. And I don't really need to know that some of us figure out better ways of doing things, and some of us have an X factor where we take that headwind and we turn it into a tailwind somehow. And we can call it all kinds of things. We can call it divine inspiration or whatever. But I have a difficult time just leaping into the idea that I chose all that. I don't really see how it matters if I chose it or not. If I'm consistent in my desire to up-level my experience and to get the wisdom, and to get the nectar of my lessons, that to me is enough. That to me is enough. And if I can help other people, like I said last time, I think if I can find a way to get far enough in to be able to help other people reflect back, so they can in turn figure out what their lesson is from that lesson. What did you prefer?
Doesn't matter.
Okay. Yeah, the wisdom, whatever the wisdom is. I am going to my next level if I got a chance to take a really crappy situation, turn it into something positive and meaningful for this kid's experience, and then, wow, if I can figure out a way to help some other people out with that exact same thing that could have just been poop, that could have led me to just being an addict and just checking out like my father did, like that. If I can up-level that and do it for other people, then to me that's a good thing. That feels good.
Part of my thought process when you were sharing your thoughts there was, when someone chooses to go to a university, they get to choose their major, and they get to choose the class they're taking and the teacher that they take it from. But the Board of Regents actually said, if you're going to get this degree, you're going to need this number of credits, and you're going to need these classes in order to get this degree.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So somewhere in the universe, someone has set up this process of, you got to take these classes in order to get this degree. And you may get to choose the universe you go to, the teachers you take it from, and the time you take it, and whether you take a year in between and you go to Europe and all that sort of thing. But it does seem to have some organization or structure for getting through this thing that we call life. If you're going to do it with peace, and you're going to do it with being, able to be content and have joy, that doesn't just show up in one lifetime. It isn't. You just can't. The books and the knowledge and my experiences, you can't do that in just one lifetime. And it's going to take many, many lessons from many perceptions to get there and go, oh yeah, those really hard things that you were talking about, those really shitty things that you're judging. When you use the word shitty, you're taking a set of circumstances and you're making a judgment as though that is bad and that shouldn't happen, and you're going to make lemonade from it. When in reality, it's like, that's as divine as real. Yeah, that was perfect.
Yeah. And that's what I often tell people when they've had a nice experience with me, when they hear about some of how my childhood went. I let them know that they're like, oh, I wish you didn't have to go through all that. I said, I wouldn't be who I am. Yeah. I wouldn't understand what you're going through had I not been through that spectrum.
Yeah, so you get it.
I get it.
We're all saying
the same thing. Yeah. I'm just, I just don't assume that there was a point where I said, okay, this is what I'm going to choose, and there's a divine creator that's kind of writing all this, and I'm just going to, work my magic, and hopefully it correlates to that magic at some point. To me, it just seems way too. There's so much value in each juxtaposition of life, that, like you were saying earlier, just one little deviation. There's sort of like what I understood you to say earlier is that there's maybe a particular hologram or trajectory that's set out when we incarnate, right? We come in and this is kind of some of the parameters, but based on what we choose to do and when we choose to do it and how much we empower ourselves, has a lot to do with whether we rise out of that. So anyway, I don't mean to be contrarian about things.
You're not.
Okay.
I wanted to say that the only thing, regardless of the belief in whether we have an idea ahead of time, any of that, to me, all that it serves ultimately is the owning of it is taking part of your power, your personal power in this experience. Because if you can say, I can create my reality and you do it now.
And I can have that conversation without believing that I chose it ahead of time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think that for me, what I find is that leaves a part of your power on the table somewhere. You're leaving a part of yourself somewhere else and not incorporating it into all that you've become. But I don't think, if that's indeed true, because I don't know that you could be where you are if that isn't already inherent in your experience. Because if you would be denying that in a way that...
Denying what?
Denying that you have created this entire experience to some degree or another.
Sure. Beforehand.
Yes.
Okay.
That you wouldn't be here, you wouldn't be where you are, because that's a huge threshold. At least to my understanding, it's a huge threshold to being able to continue to access higher and higher levels of vibration and consciousness. Because it's all predicated on responsibility. It's all predicated on the ability to respond to whatever's presented. And as Jeff was saying, that this all becomes objects in the field of my awareness. Now, how do I choose to respond to them?
Exactly.
So it's that it isn't a... I could see that it could be construed as a kind of maybe self-centered approach, but I think the whole thing is. So it's kind of like, yeah, and for me it's kind of like, yeah, and your point. I mean, because I can't run your life.
Yeah.
I can't run his life. The only one I get to run is mine. If I have kids, I might get to damage their lives or impact their lives, but I can't run it. I mean, maybe for a few years when they're like this big. But how many stories are there from parents that go on? I mean, videos I've watched.
It's
amazing. You just
so
go,
amazing.
What? Because people try to run their lives.
Yeah.
And that's the part that seems to not be very successful.
Right.
We've all heard the term or the phrase, you only live once, right?
Yeah.
So there's a part of that that's true, and there's a bigger part of that that's not true. For me, the part that's not true is our soul spirit. Been here many times, will continue to show up and evolve and morph and grow. The part that's true about you only live once is in this body, in this set of circumstances, with this personality and this ego, one time.
Yeah. Right.
So that part of us doesn't want to think that we planned all this out. That part of us doesn't want to think that there was a divine intelligence, we're here to learn life lessons and everything. Because that part of us really wants to run the show. That part of us doesn't want to accept the fact that at the end of 80 years, 85 years, you're one and done, and that's it.
Sure. And there may just be a part of the experience where it just doesn't make a lot of sense for me to put credence on something that is speculation. Mm-hmm. And you'll find that from me. I tried that long and deep for decades, and it wasn't really, and I'm not bitter. I'm really grateful that I had that experience. I'm really glad I grew up the way that I did in the South, and the way, but just to gather something on insufficient evidence, and it's not evidence necessarily empirical. There's things I've experienced that I can't really explain. Some pretty extraordinary things that have happened with ancestors and whatnot. But for me to say definitively that I chose all of this, I don't know where I would be getting that information to be definitive about it. I'm open to the idea, like I think that's what this is. I think we've all just kind of played with different iterations of what makes sense for us, and that's kind of I think that there's central themes with all of this, and like you were saying, that a lot of times it's just languaging, how we piece it together. But I feel like I'm weary of just labeling something in such a way that allows me to just blindly take something on insufficient evidence because of a hunch. You know, like, well, there's got to be a divine creator if I have the capacity to create divinely. I don't necessarily follow that. I don't necessarily ascribe to that. And I'm down with everything else that we're talking about, but I don't have anything that's helping me to better understand how I chose everything that I've had in this life. I love my life. I absolutely am practically in tears of gratitude for the way my life has turned out. I'm really happy with the way that it is. But so it's not like I'm upset looking at the idea that this was all pieced together and I chose each lesson, I chose my parents and all that kind of stuff. I'm open to that, but I just don't have the clarity you guys do about. And maybe you could tell me how you came to that clarity of realizing that you wrote this life tape the way that it's unfurling.
How to answer that question? For me, it's been, I think as I have, at the juncture, at the points that I have had to, and the years that I spent going back in my experience to understand my relationship with my father and understand my relationship with my mother,
Sure.
and seeing, it was sort of a number of things, because there was my grandfather who the three of us carry the same name. There's been some interesting experiences that I've had with that sort of blew my mind. But I think that the clarity of it for me came in realizing that the owning of it changed the course of my experience.
Okay.
Because then there's no longer any blame anywhere. It is, this was, and I'm not saying that there weren't situations within the context of my childhood that I had no control over. And I'm not saying that there aren't things, but it brings it all back to something he said, which I'm a firm believer in, and that is, they were doing the best they could do with what they had from where they were.
100%.
And the realization, I had an experience, this is probably about 6 years ago. I was, my business partner at the time, we were talking about my dad. And my dad and I have had a rough relationship. I mean, from my experience, from my vantage point, he never liked me, and that didn't change until I was in my 40s. That was my experience, that he just simply didn't like me. He was 16 when he had me, or 18 when he had me. I was the first of four, but the whole point of the story is more the evolution of that relationship, and my coming to the realization one day, here I am, this guy, this young kid, I came out when I was in high school. I was active before that, not really knowing what was going on, but firstborn, namesake, junior, thinking to myself, what it must have felt like for the man who is my namesake to look at his firstborn child who wanted nothing to do with him. How that must have felt.
Right.
What did that feel like for his firstborn child to go, you're a dick? And I don't care what you say, you're a dick. And my dad, and the funniest part was the realization that there was never a point in my life that my dad wasn't there. He always provided. He wasn't an alcoholic. He didn't abuse us. Yeah, we got spanked, but that was then. That was, that was the way it was. They stayed married until I was 30.
Wow.
There was nothing about the experience that I could go back and go, well, if he didn't do this, then in taking that ownership, I no longer needed any of it.
The ownership of saying, I chose all this beforehand.
This is my creation. I created this man in my life who was to be my father, who constantly reflected to me not enough, who constantly reflected to me this idea that I wasn't measuring up somehow, and yet there was no way to get there from here.
Sure.
Right? Because I was not going to be like him. That was, I mean, if
so you learned to accept yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And trust myself, but that came with leaving home at 15 and doing what I needed to do. But the point being that all that did for me, and all of that clarity came with the realization that in the end, if I own it, it can't own me.
Absolutely.
But
can't we own what's happening in our lives without thinking that we were looking through some great menu prior to our existence, and like kind of having.
I don't know that I give a crap too much about the great menu. I mean, I think that's all about energy. I think it's more about choices of energy. This woman resonates at a vibration, and this man resonates at a vibration.
That's a language I can understand. I can relate to that.
That's more where I go. Not so much the idea of, okay, turn to page 3 and
what do you need here, and who,
right. No, I don't think that's the case. I think it's more energetic in that here is a vibrational bathtub that satisfies this vibrational vessel that needs to go in that bathtub, and that those energies are going to stimulate the resolution of vibrations that are cattywampus, and some that just need a little extra force and push to get you to go whatever direction you want to go in.
And what about you? When did that narrative of I chose all this before I got here come into play? And was it something external that you heard that resonated with you, or is it something that you came up with internally?
Yeah, I think it was a combination for sure. It really started when my friend Joseph Farley invited me to participate on his radio show, and his venue was finding an author that has recently written a book on metaphysics and the afterlife and that sort of thing, and we spent an hour interviewing him, and they were willing to come on the air to talk about their book because it was airtime for their book, and they were selling more books. And after doing about 10 of those interviews, and in preparation for the interview, I read the book.
Which was it?
All of
it.
Yeah, lots of books. But it was just interesting that there was, no matter who the author was, there was a commonality, there was a consensus that they were all pretty much saying the same thing. And then since that time, it's just been more and more books. That's just kind of like, okay, now that makes sense to me, and it's like I see it in everything. Mm-hmm. It's like I can't not see it.
Right.
It's just really strange how that works. So I know that if you're sincere in what you're saying, that you're open to it, and it's okay if it works that way. It's okay if it doesn't work that way. That we all know that if you're looking for something, you're going to find it.
Yeah.
If you're rejecting something or resisting something, then that's where you'll stay too. Mm-hmm. So I like being open and seeing what shows up for me.
Yeah.
I can have a tendency to be gullible, and I can believe in the Kool-Aid. And but I'm also enough of a scientist to go, well, is anybody else drinking the Kool-Aid? And let's get 5 people to drink the Kool-Aid and see if at least 4 of them have the same experience.
Sure.
And then I'm onto something. So it's also the things that I'm reading, listening to, talking about. I take it into my practice, and I love that we call it a practice because I get to experiment. I get paid to experiment with people who want to have these experiences.
Well said, sir.
And guess what? They're having these experiences.
Yeah.
And then, people listening to this, if you want to see that what I'm talking about is real, go to the Strategic Counseling YouTube channel and watch the videos that I've put up of patients that have been willing to let me record their sessions and talk about their experiences with their higher self and their past lives and their afterlife connections. And to me, it's just like, well, am I creating that? And if I am, that's pretty damn bitchin'. And if that's not me creating it, it's just stepping into an energy that the universe is allowing me to have that experience. Well, that's okay too. And maybe it's not what the universe would let someone else have that experience.
Sure.
And then we'd have that, well, it works for me, it doesn't work for me. It's like, well, okay, the universe is big enough that it doesn't have to be the same one size fits all.
Yeah.
I'm glad we wound up with the one size fits all thing. Just like the Eat Right for Your Blood Type. I don't know if you guys have read that book or not, but there is not one diet that works for everybody. Right. And there's like 4 primary diets that you're going to probably resonate with more than any of the others. One of the books I'm reading right now talks about how there seem to be people on the planet that are like on vacation, like their life is a vacation.
You might have mentioned that last. Yeah.
And there are other people who are just getting the crap beat out of them.
Yeah.
But yet we're on the same planet at the same
Isn't
time.
that wild?
Right? So the way the author was describing it is, for the person that seems to be getting the crap beat out of them and every day is a struggle and a really big challenge, it's like they look at the person who has the, Rancho Santa Fe life where everything is just kind of like happening and it looks so easy and everything, so that we think we're unworthy and we're not lovable and that we don't deserve, and all we have to do is look over there and go, look, they deserve, they're lovable, everything just shows up for them, so I must be a piece of shit. And they have to be here in order for us to compare and contrast. So they volunteer to come here. Yes, I'll come to Earth and have the vacation this time because I did get my ass kicked the last 3 times, kind of thing. So I think that's kind of fun to just play with as well.
Yeah.
They just have to be all different shapes and sizes, and there are some people that came here to plant their butt in the Vista Detention Center, and that's where they're going to be for the next 10 years. And somehow they say derogatory things to their cellmate or the sheriff or whoever's, that they're serving a purpose doing that life. And there's a point behind it and a reason for it. Somehow it all fits.
And on the heels of that, when you were thinking about solving homelessness, do you have a different filter on the role of homelessness?
Yeah,
okay.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that for some people, that's what they need to be doing. For other people, I think they do need assistance, and there are programs in place to be able to facilitate that.
Yeah. Nice.
But if you actually made it illegal to be homeless...
Huh. Interesting concept.
But wait a minute, I came here to do that.
Yeah.
You're not going to let me do that, Jeff? No, I'm taking a moral stand. It's wrong for you to be homeless. But I came here to feel like a reprobate and a morally disgusting, despicable person so that I could learn to love myself.
That was an interesting choice of words, if I heard that correctly.
Sounds judgmental, maybe?
Yeah. Like, wow. Okay, so we don't have to go there. I just went, well, wait. I guess that would be under the assumption that homelessness is a bad thing, which apparently it is.
I think most
Which
of
is
us
interesting given the number of people that choose it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I don't know if you know it, but does he know about your desire?
Maybe a little.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit about it. But
Yeah.
that clearly wasn't supposed to happen in my life at that time, or there's just been an evolving past it, or maybe coming back to a center of really what I'm supposed to be doing. I can have a tendency to spread myself thin in a bunch of different things.
See what lands.
And not really get what I'm supposed to be doing done. So,
but you always got a pretty strong feeler out, and I guess I do notice that you can spread yourself thin, but you're paying attention to what lands.
yeah.
There's always something landing. It may not be the thing that you were all fired up about 5 months ago, but you're always noticing, and there's always a ballast point that you're working with that gets the energy that you're here to put in at the time. So And I appreciate both of you coming back and helping me understand the idea that you wrote this ahead of time. And I feel like I'm understanding more of, it seems more of allegory, it seems more metaphor than like you were sitting there going, okay.
Yeah.
Because like it just seems a little warlocky.
Yeah.
For me to think of it that way.
Yeah. There's
to jump to that specific thing and having like definitive statements about it, to me just seems like, oh, we don't necessarily need to I don't necessarily need to have supernatural agency to trip out on all the potentiality that's here right now. You know what I mean? I don't need to think that somewhere else, some other dimension that I was in created this for myself. I'm really okay with just realizing that right now this is all I know, this lifetime that I've had, and the better I take care of this vessel, the more I master this self, the more enjoyment, the more people I can impact. And maybe I need to watch some more of your videos to see what's going on in there. It sounds amazing, and I'm turning a barge. I've been turning a barge for a long time, growing up the way I did. But I'm open to new things. But thank you for that. I like the way you guys take time to explain things, and it's part of what I love about this. And I think the last couple times when you and I were working on kind of the same concept, but we were just using very different language, I thought about how that could turn into people who aren't compassionate and kind and sentient, and this idea of my thoughts and my thing and your thing is challenging my thing. And it's like, and what happens in the world when people don't see eye to eye on things. And that's what I love, because there's a little frustration and a little like it was just cool to feel and see, and knowing that we all have such similar backgrounds but could have such opposition in a moment of how things are being said and handled, and just how that shows up exponentially in our society with people not getting each other, and ways to potentially have some leadership for more peaceful resolution on things. But
yeah, one of the things that I've begun to really appreciate about our group is that whoever is listening to us might really get what I'm saying, and then there could be somebody who doesn't get what I'm saying at all, but when you say it, they get it.
Right.
When Jim says it, they get it.
yeah.
And we don't really even, it's not a requirement that we agree with any of this stuff.
Yeah.
We're just talking about ideas and concepts and what seems to make sense to us now. And gosh, if I could look back at, just 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been talking about any of this stuff 10 years ago. None of it. I would have been still talking about the brain.
Yeah.
Just the brain.
Just the old brain. That simple little mechanism. So it seems like we covered the concept of using lesson or experience, and using that to ascribe a certain amount of wisdom to having more of the kind of experiences we'd like to have, and maybe sharing that with others. But what are some other reasons why we're here besides just the experiential side?
So we have to play all the roles.
I see.
What does that mean?
Meaning, well, go ahead. I don't want to. My sense is that one time you're the jailer,
Yep.
and one time you're the convict.
Yep.
Like you, and the more you have these different experiences, the more love and compassion you have for all, and that's where I feel like I'm getting to in my life. I don't care what I see and what people, someone who doesn't have money or no teeth, and like the way people treat people that are serving them, and like the CEO to the most humble janitor. Like I can relate and I can have beautiful fodder with all of that. So it feels like, if we're doing this over and over again, which I think is highly likely, that, and on a side note, because we have more and more people, where are the new souls? If if there's the recycling of souls, and some of those are ancient souls that are being recycled into new beings, where are the new souls coming from?
Just splitting.
What's that?
Splitting.
Okay.
Just like stocks. They have stock splits. They have soul splits.
Okay. Okay.
Well, and considering the idea that if we consider the idea of it all being sparks, it's just another. It's the complexity has called for more complexity. The expansion calls for more understanding. The transformation calls for more realization. It's just. I find it the concept of the whole karmic thing that you talked about before was if you came in at this one and then you got to come back and do this one. I think that only occurs if you accrue negative energy attached to this experience. Then in order for the experience to complete, it has to reverse itself in some form.
So there's a point where you don't have to keep doing it.
Oh, I definitely think so.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely driven on how do you, because if I go through the course of my own life experience, I've done a lot of things, and I've been on both sides of a lot of things, depending on what job I chose or what position I was in or whatever. Not even necessarily work, but it just left me a question mark when you said that, and I went, that's interesting. I don't know if that role was executed with integrity, if that role was executed in a way that to the things that you spoke of afterwards, which was that finding the compassion and that larger space, that what would be the point of coming to do that? Because in order to get there, that means you've put yourself in this position and have grown into a larger understanding. So that's done. That experience, that particular one. So it seems that the karmic thing seems to drive the reliving thing, and that the more, because it seems that the more, and again, just from what I've read, things that I've seen, Eastern versus Western kind of thing, is that the yogis and the teachers and the masters who get to that place of ascension, or that ascended place, don't have that karmic baggage, and that's a big part of going to that part of transformation, is that one of the big thresholds is when you step out of the cycle of karma. And that when you step out of the cycle of karma, now you've elevated to that great place of compassion, because now you're no longer in judgment of any of it. So it doesn't matter. It was one of the lessons, one of the early lessons that when I was first working with my teacher was the whole idea of chop wood, carry water. And it's that way forever.
The what?
Chop wood, carry water.
Yeah.
That's never ending. That you can ascend to all kinds of great levels, but if you can't chop wood, carry water,
with peace and joy and find the bliss in those,
and everything,
in that simplicity,
in relationships, and
the redundancy,
and understanding that it doesn't matter if you're here or if you're here. It's a relativity thing. It's not perceptual.
Right on board with that. And there's different forms of yoga that have you doing the same asanas every single time to get into that redundancy, to find the joy in
and the subtleties
of doing the exact same thing, because it's never exactly the same thing. But there's people like, I need more stimulation. But you can get into a really nice parallel universe of experience when your body understands what's happening next, and what happens in the mind when you're moving your body into these really remarkable states that happen when you you know what's happening without having to think about what's happening.
Yeah. But most won't go to that level.
Right.
Because the reality is, as soon as you have the thought that I need more, then you don't need more. You need to go back and start over.
Right. Yeah.
Because your concept of needing more is assuming that you fleshed out all the subtleties of the energetic experience,
exactly,
of the feel, whatever it is. That's which is, I think, pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
One example I can think of that's really fun to play with is there's been a couple of psychics that have really their life's work has been looking at people. I'm going to reference Colonel George Custer as an example of karma playing out. So psychics that have channeled Custer, and him being somebody that had to wipe out the savages and led many battles and claimed many lives, in order to balance that karma, reincarnated as a Cherokee Indian in some kind of capacity as a chief to deal with the plight of what it was like for the Indians to live on a reservation. And so he, that which he killed and eradicated, he became and had to deal with the consequences of all of his actions in that prior life to then work it through and to kind of pay it off and to resolve it. And the author, I don't remember what book that was, it was a few years back, but that author had like case after case after case after case of examples like that of how karma can play itself out and work itself out. Fascinating when you think about that.
Quite so.
So it's like if your life ends, or at the end of your life, if there's some great conflict you have that's unresolved, that you have prejudice against a people, a nation, a tribe, a belief system, there's a good likelihood that your next iteration is right into the middle of it. And wouldn't that make perfect sense?
Yeah. I'll come back as a crow.
Or your father's father.
Oh.
That's actually what I was told. That was part of the extraordinary thing with the relationship with my father.
Yeah.
Because his father, and interestingly enough, his dad was a horrible alcoholic, and I don't drink much any at all. I mean, a little bit you see me drink, and even then I'm sort of like, okay.
Yeah.
But the timing, the relationship that he and I had, I never knew my grandfather. He was dead before I was born. So then the relationship with my dad and how much of my energy reminded him of him.
Wow.
and how that all kind of evolved over the lifetime. And that's just been, it was another one of those kind of remarkable freedoms or places of freedom, because whether it's true or not, something really powerfully resonated in that just made sense to who I am, to the things that I've chosen in my life, to understanding, the relationship with my dad and all that stuff. It's that stuff is just fascinating to me. I mean, some of the stuff that we were talking about, the pre-show, the pre-game show. I see, as I said before, I see it energetically, but ultimately for me, there is a satisfaction in taking the ownership, whether it's true or not. There's a satisfaction for me that if that's true in the way that my life has evolved and where I am now, it's a hugely satisfying thing to think that I set a plan, I set an idea in action, I set an intention out before I was actually even here to create this magnificent person that was going to do whatever it is, whatever I'm doing, and that as I look back at the scope of my life from very early on, that I can see that pattern unfolding, that I can see that ownership or that clarity, because it takes all the onus off of everything else, that I can go, wow, that's amazing. I made that choice. Why did I make that choice? would I have made, one of the things, this may be a digression, but one of the things that has always fascinated me is that when people talk about regret,
Oh yeah.
and I go, really? Really?
You spent a lot of time in that? Yeah.
What are you regretting? Well, I could have did it. And it's like, no.
Mm-mm.
If you could have,
Such
you
a
would have.
Colossal.
No. But sometimes people...
I could have had a V8.
Right? Yeah.
You remember
But
that?
people look at you like, what do you mean you don't regret anything? What the hell would I regret anything? It got me here.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're like, but didn't you want to make a different choice? No, because if I did, I would have.
Yeah.
If I didn't want to leave home when I was 15, I would have knocked on the door. But I didn't.
Yeah.
I went, yeah, this isn't going to work for me anymore. And I turned around and walked away.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to regret. There's nothing to... There's no juncture that I can look at my life and go, geez, I wish I had chose that path. Because every juncture I stopped and went, where do I want to be? What do I want to do? What feels right? Ultimately. And that's the place...
And what do you think you were seeking when you were changing that up?
What was I seeking?
Seeking, like, what, when you thought...
To know thyself.
Right.
Forever and always.
Yeah.
I can't think of any other motivating factor in my life other than to know this.
And how many
person.
relationships have you been in where people weren't on that same page? Shut the door. Shut the door. The wheels are coming off of this thing. That's awesome.
The famous urinator.
Piss heard around the world. Nothing.
Jeffrey is the world famous pisser.
What's in
It just there was
We
some
just recorded-
racehorse
we just recorded the
relieving
racehorse.
himself and then
Have we recorded the whole thing?
Okay.
What minute is that? Don't think so editing.
$1.17.
We still going?
We're still going.
All right.
And
So
we can
I
wind
got a question.
Taste that. Yes, sir.
When you experience Timothy's energy, and you have the blessing of engaging with his personality and who he is as a man, does anything about him say that he got ripped off as a kid by his dad, how he showed up? Does that ever enter your mind of clearly he got fucked over by his dad? No, not for me either. Only not at all. Only never thought it. Only not even in my consciousness.
No. Like, not even a... Yeah.
Thank you for that.
You're
I don't
welcome.
look at him and think, daddy issues.
Nope. Nope, not at all. Only
Not
zero.
even doesn't... Nope.
Matter of fact, if you never brought it up, I never would have
Exactly.
thought it. It just,
Yeah. And it's interesting when people hear about some of that, they just get so absorbed in the story. I'm like, no, that was the best. My dad not being here and the way he left was the best catharsis of my entire existence. I got to let go. I don't know what happened, but the way I got to forgive that and frame that and let that burn off, it just created... I used to have depression up until that point, but like that awful event for some people, that was the best thing that ever happened to me, was my father's passing. Which is, a little strange to say. It's not strange to say. It's strange for some people, most people to hear. But most people have a lot harder reaction to my life than I do when they want details. People, and it was so funny. It's like, oh, yeah, how did your dad die? That kind of thing. Anyway, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
That really
And the reality is you didn't need him. And how do we know that? Because he wasn't there.
Yeah, exactly.
Just wasn't the standard story.
Yeah.
You know, Dad wasn't there to coach your little league team.
Mm-hmm.
Neither was mine.
Yeah.
And you know what? Big fucking deal.
Yeah.
Didn't need that. How do I know? Because it didn't show up.
Hmm.
If I needed it, it would have shown up.
And it's all the all of that stuff we've talked about before, the mass consciousness of the way it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
It
Right.
says,
Should.
this is
Yeah.
the story
Right.
that you need to tell yourself now because you didn't have a dad. Don't you understand?
Yeah.
There are people starving in wherever they starve. And they don't have a dad.
In the chicken coop. These poor bastards. Wherever they starve.
At Costco.
I couldn't even get it all together.
That's great. That's great.
Story is a good thing to talk about. Actually, when you started this, I thought we were going to go there.
Oh, we're here now.
Yeah.
But story is the wrecker of lives.
100%.
So how would you
Or the builder.
weave that into our discussion that we're here to rewrite our story? We're here to
Let go of
unwrite
any
our
story.
Yeah, not have a story.
You know, it's I know I've told you this, but I was diagnosed with cancer in 2009, and went through treatment and did that whole thing and did the whole walk. And 2 years later,
Did the whole walk with the cancer treatments.
Yeah,
Okay, gotcha.
Not the walk
And-
of shame.
I've done it in my life, but the thing that always blew my mind, and I think blew other people's minds, is that I never resonated with, like, I wouldn't see a cancer thing on TV and go, I got to participate. I never went on a cancer walk, never will, probably. I don't associate in that fashion. That was my experience. I learned what I wanted and needed from that experience, and now it's not an experience anymore. It's story. If it's of value, because if I tell you that story I can tell you that story in a way that it's like there's an iPad on the table, it has a different impact, right? But if I tell the story as if it was the most dire time of my life and I was suffering,
You poor thing.
you know, I'm pulling I'm pulling all your loads of shit into my loads of shit.
Amen.
You know? Like, here, wait, let me hook you with my story.
Yeah.
And I think that's so the fascinating thing was 2 years later, I'd have to remind myself I had cancer.
Yeah.
I'd have to, like, somebody would say something about it and I would go, oh, that's
Oh, yeah,
nice.
yeah,
Yeah. And then I would go,
Wait, that
oh
was
shit,
me.
that was me.
Yeah.
Because it's so not a part of my reality.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting to see how those stories, all those events are just, you know, when I tell people my story, if I ever get into that conversation and I share part, I start remembering things that I completely didn't remember happened. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I did that?
Mm-hmm.
I forgot about that. Oh, I did that too? Wow, that's pretty awesome. Even if it didn't matter what it was, I experienced that, I should say, is the most more legitimate way. And so it isn't that I don't know that I would say I'm storyless. I would say that I'm not, there's no attachment to any story. And that I can use any story to facilitate a situation. And there's very few situations that I can't find a story to support in helping them lose their story.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I can say, oh yeah, I was there. I
Yeah.
did that, and this is how this went this direction, and this is the way this direction is going the way you're talking about the story. So which result do you want to create?
Yeah.
You know?
I just had a vision of an orphanage of storyless children.
Hmm.
Like like just completely turning it on its ear, like a little 5-minute excerpt for just kind of gripping people. Everybody cares about the orphan, but all these kids speaking from a non-storied existence, and just like they're all in tattered peasant little potato please kind of thing, but they have just the most profound things to say because they're storyless children. Yeah, I like that idea.
Yeah.
Everybody losing their story. And there's times when I kind of begin to expand this out, because it's sometimes I think, oh, this is so nice, and like how do you start to get this out there? And I think of, why is it that so many people, why have we at times in our lives needed the story? And what is the avenue to help? You help people with their stories. We all do. What is like a general push? Do we care about that? I know sometimes when I talk about more people having a higher consciousness about these kinds of things, you're like, well, I'm not here to save the planet. But like, what is the common denominator push that we can help? How do we help people lose their stories? Is that part of what we're doing here? How do we get that? That is one of the most important directives in life, from what I've seen on my table in 25 years, is that people. How long have you been doing your gig?
25 years. Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, what's the first step in helping people recognize that there is a story? What is a story for someone that doesn't know? We are talking about this like they know what we're talking about. So what is a story? A story is,
to me, it's the assignment of meaning to an event that takes place.
Good answer.
Damn! Gotta love having that freaking science guy
That was
around.
that was the answer. That was the one that I had in my head.
Say it one more time.
So the assignment of meaning to an event that takes place. Okay. And the thing that really trips me out about the concept of that is I like to back up a step and talk about control before I get into story. That for me, the only control that I have on the planet is the assignment of meaning of the events that take place in my life. I cannot control the events in any way, shape, or form. And I have no control of anything that happens except for the meaning that I give it. And that's the only thing we can do.
Gorgeous.
That's the beginning conversation of writing your story.
Yeah.
And I'm the only one who can write my story. I can give you permission to reach over in my journal and start writing Jeff's a dumb fuck and he doesn't know what he's talking about and he drinks the Kool-Aid and he tries to get everybody else to drink it. That you could write that in my journal and I could read that a few times and that could become my story. And especially if you write your book and you go on to be famous and everything, and I don't, and I worship Timothy, and that's now my story.
That's how dysfunctional
relationships
are
created. And then somebody comes along, or you come visit me 5 years from now and go, that isn't really how that went down, Jeff. Let me help you rewrite your story. Then we start rewriting our story. But lots of people, we let a lot of people write our story for us in like indelible ink.
Yeah. And because of the hardship of certain kinds of stories, there's a public accolade in condoning what they went through. And I dig that but there is a point where I think it becomes. I've worked with a couple of people that were prisoners of war, and getting into the mindset of someone who has been systematically brutalized by another human being for shit's sake. What was the real end to that? Finding almost a certain kind of solace in the capacity to forgive that person to think about like
Yeah, they were playing a role.
they were playing a role. Like,
And they
like,
did a great
can you
job.
imagine the pain that that person must have been in to be so checked out that they weren't tuned in?
Right.
Yeah. I like what you said about this, and I think this is an important part of the directive of what we can do is, and maybe not entirely in this format in this moment, but I think helping people understand story and identify what is the feeling they have when they're there's that thing on repeat. This is the 985th time I've told this, and what is my intention in saying that? And I found that that's a great way to arrest the story. Hey, brother, I just met you here in the buffet line, and you're laying some big stuff on me. I'm good, but I'm just curious. What is your intention in telling me this right now? And if they're in ego, the ego and the story, those so closely related. But the ego needs that repeat. It needs that confirmation, over and over again. But when people are asked, "Hey, what is your intention in telling me that?" If they're in ego, they get really defensive.
Sure.
Yeah. What other techniques do you guys have when someone's coming in and running some story? What's some common
I ask
ways?
him, do you really want me to believe that about you?
Yeah, nice.
Why would you want me to believe that?
I like that.
Would you let me hold on to my belief of who you are and how you're showing up rather than who you really want me to believe that you are? It might take a while, but could you just let me hold on to how I see you showing up and how I see who you are? And maybe over time, you might be open to that becoming how you could see yourself. Because chances are, amongst the three of us, you probably have a better story about who I am than I have about who I am.
Likewise.
Yeah, chances are.
And during our think tank, when we all were speaking about each other, there were some things that you said and about me. You chose me to speak about, and there's some really touching things that you came up with. Things that I wouldn't have suspected that you had taken note of. But yeah,
that's my experience of you. That's
Yeah.
how you show up for me.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about that, what I've learned, since that time. I know that this is on tape, but this is good stuff. This is me being transparent. Had a chance to work with a woman 5 years ago or less that, in my opinion, was like a 10 in like every way.
Yeah.
And there was some awesome energy that was exchanged, and we really did some good work and stuck to the clean lines that needed to be adhered to in my profession. And there was a point at which she had asked if I had feelings for her, and she told me, before you answer the question, I want you to know that I am psychic and I can read people, so please,
Right.
please do yourself a favor and give the most honest answer that you can. And I said, well, yeah, who wouldn't find you attractive and interesting and all of that sort of thing? And she said, so here's how this works, Jeff, for me. What you see in me, you actually see in yourself, and I'm simply a mirror back to you. And I went, that's so freaking cool.
Yeah.
So for what I was seeing in her was my own femininity that was showing up in her that totally rocked my world.
Yeah.
And that's an awesome reflection of who I am
Sure.
on the inside that I was completely oblivious to, because I don't see myself as a feminine being, right, at all, in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
But there is a lot of femininity in me, and there's a lot of masculinity too. So I really loved that. So the super awesome, flattering things that we hear from other people are really what they see in themselves. It somehow is just manifesting in the other person. So as much as I do believe and experience you that way, it's because when we're together, that's what's showing up. So that doesn't take anything away from what I
Indeed.
said, because you still show up that way for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I relate wholeheartedly to that. It's
Great.
all reflection, isn't it?
Greg Braden he talks about that in one of his books, where he was doing some seminar, and after the seminar met up with some lady, and they went to dinner, and they had this amazing experience, and it could have led to a hotel room kind of thing, and somehow between the two of them they stopped that event from unfolding because they weren't in a place to really be able to have that experience. And they each concluded that what was so magic that was taking place between the two of them was the reflection of themselves in each other.
Being seen. Isn't it lovely to be seen?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. So maybe that's another reason why we're here too, to have this experience.
I will actually write that down.
I have a very interesting kind of, well, interesting to me, thing that happens around people's story. Because I tend to really focus on their energy, so I'm listening to the energy of their words, I'm listening to the choice of language, I'm observing and experiencing whatever they're doing. As they're telling the story, there's always some tell. There's something that shows up in their, there's a word that will show up in their sentence that'll go, what was that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll focus on that. And I'll go to the story via that. And a lot of times I've even said this with clients as I'm sitting there, and I said, I'm really sorry, but the only thing I heard was that word. And everything else was blah, 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 blah. So let's go beyond that. Can we focus on, tell me about that. Tell me about that.
Well, that's not what do you ever get that? Well, because they start to protect it.
Yeah, but then it's like, no, I'm not going for that.
Yeah.
I want to understand that word. Why did you choose that word when
I
you
hear
said that?
that's not what I mean. You know what I mean. I'm like, no.
No.
I am trusting your language skills. That's how we're communicating right now. And there are words that you chose that are showing up for me right now. And can we play with that? I'm the same way. Yeah, like a hound dog.
Love that.
Yeah.
Because it's but when you can go there that way, it's like going in the back door. Because now you've kind of enrolled them in the fascination about, why is he focused on that word?
Yeah.
So tell me why did you choose that? You could have chosen this word, this word, this word, and this word, but you chose this word. Why? Well, I don't know. Well, how does that word feel? Why do you feel it? Why, And it's usually something subtle. It's like, I wish I had an example I could, because sometimes the subtlety is fascinating. From my perspective, you just listen to somebody talk, and then this word goes, wah, wah, wah. You're like, and I can't hear anything else.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
I'm
okay,
the same way.
I'm just going to wait till they finish talking and then go back and ask about the word, because the rest of it is bullshit, basically. From the point that the alarm goes off, everything after that is just nonsense anyway.
Yeah.
So it's typically, that's all the story that we need to back up what we're trying to hide from or cover up or pretend we don't know. So it's all, I think we all say the same thing, which is, if you empower the individual you're with, they're less likely to need to be stuck in their story. So however you do that, I think we all have a little different approach to how we do that, but it's believing in their
But that's just the way I am, Jim. You don't understand. That's just the way I am. Yeah.
So
I know.
I'm going to share a story, a personal story.
Please.
My personal story, even though there's really no proof to support it, is that what I have to say and what I have to share is not worthy of other people hearing. It's kind of a bullshit story.
That's a story that you've carried.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's my story.
All right.
And when I hear myself say that story out loud, it makes me want to laugh.
You're like, come here, man.
But
Do you understand who you are? What's it? Yeah.
But yet, there's part of me that really believes that story. And as a result, I've somewhat played small. I'm still on a pretty small stage.
I can relate.
And what would be helpful for me is to go back and figure out, where the hell did I learn to believe that story? Why do I believe that story?
Right.
There's no proof to it. I actually have 10 times more proof to the opposite, or to the contrary,
Yeah.
than that stupid story. But
Yeah.
as long as that story's in there, I'm still going to play small. So this venue that we're doing is helping me break out of my story.
Yeah.
This is the beginning of me putting an end to that story.
Absolutely.
And sometimes that is the result of generational or karmic stuff. That's the stuff below the conscious threshold from my experience that lives there however long it's lived there. It may have nothing to do with your dad, may have nothing to do with your parents, may have nothing to do with anything that you experienced this time, but it was such a powerful energy
at some point in the
point
recent, yeah.
that the experiences of this life have stimulated that, because that's what needs to become conscious in order for you to take the next biggest step in your experience.
Sure. So do you think it's ironic that I actually make a living and I support myself and many other people in my life based on what I have to say? Isn't that kind of funny in a way? But yet my story is I can only say it to one person at a time, an hour at a time. I can't get up on a stage and say it to 30 people at a time and get paid for it.
You too.
Well, hell yeah.
Wow.
And I sure the hell can't write it down and put it between two thick pieces of paper and call it a book and put it out there and think that people will buy it and be interested in it. That's part of the story too.
Yeah. So you
Even though I'm actually a really good writer, and most everything I've written is people have sucked it up and loved it.
And
but
just for the compassion factor, what if you reworded that? Instead of saying that you can't do that, say that I haven't figured out how to do that yet. Just simply...
I'm down with that. Well, clearly I haven't.
But like you did
For
with...
me, it's deeper than just the mechanics of the how. It isn't the how that's held me up. How's easy.
Right.
But if you consider this as a physical reflection of process, which I do, left arm about the way you care for yourself, where it's as above, so below, decisions that we make about how we decide what's above and so below, and then how we express caring, that it's interesting to me, through the way my mind works, it's like, oh my God, so you filled your life with all of these other things to occupy your energy so you wouldn't have to write, you wouldn't have to speak, you could go play in the fish, you could go play in the sand, you could go play, but I don't have to write and I don't have to speak. I'm good. Because I'm not good at those things. So you're busy looking for all the things you're good at, which is a lot of things. And distracting, but realizing that it wasn't an expression of caring for oneself that you can then take out into the world for 2 cents for all that's worth. But
I'm really glad you shared that.
yeah,
I can relate.
Cool stuff.
And this is the idea that I was going to be potentially filming myself tonight. I do not like being on camera at all. But if I'm talking about something that I really believe in and it's important to me, has heart and meaning to me, then I'm having a new experience around that. And so maybe just the format and the content of what you've considered in the past hasn't been a driving force. But I'd like to, I don't know, how are you with that? Are you pretty...
Good, but I think
You can relate?
come from a very similar, I don't know if it's the same words because I haven't figured out what the words are yet. But, you know, I have a completed book. I have a full program that I've designed. I have people that I've put through that program. And I'm driving Lyft.
Yeah, I was good. Yeah, maybe.
And not that there's anything wrong with it.
No.
But it is definitely an existential crisis for me to go, why the fuck did I work my ass off to get where I am to drive cars for other people? And I was like, okay, chop wood, carry water, whatever. Okay, this is what I'm doing right now. But I have relentlessly attempted to get into that. What is it? What is that? What are those? Those not good enough statements or something? because I'm not afraid to be on a stage. I absolutely love being on stage.
You're good at it. You're great. You're natural.
Comfortable in front of people, and I'm not doing it because there's a lot of stuff around it that I abhor. You know, I mean, I went through the whole process of doing presentations once a month, every couple weeks. You know, doing the drill, and watched all of that effort and energy disintegrate again. Another round of disintegration.
At least you're not losing it.
Right. Because I didn't lose anything. I still have all the experience.
Exactly.
I still have all of the stuff that I learned through it, which is what I think it was all for anyway.
Facetious.
Yeah. But then, and now I call it my midlife crisis. And I'm like, oh, this is my midlife crisis. I'm just sifting it all and sorting it through it all. My mother even said, yeah, your dad went through that. My dad said, yeah, if you want to talk about it, we can. But his version was so different than mine. But anyway, so it wasn't meaning to go on a long-winded story about me, but it was just realizing that I'm not even realizing, knowing that I'm in a very similar place. Going, what do I do with all this?
And that's why I am so appreciative of you kind of challenging me and keeping me accountable to some pretty basic tenets of just showing up. You know, you have created some very sacred spaces for us to get to do some of this in, and that's very impactful for me, and I feel safe and seen and honored and a little uncomfortable because it's a level of accountability that I don't really give to very many people. I'm like, wow, every Wednesday night. Is there a little back door we can keep open? But I find that the sacrifice and the like, just what I was able to accomplish today to honor this tonight made me better for what I could bring tonight.
Oh, that's cool.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's just me putting some big boy pants on. Because I worked my ass off on that ranch. And I didn't really understand what it was like to just chill and enjoy. And I had a lot of opportunities to chill and enjoy, and I do a lot of that. And that's a lot of quietude, a lot of just watching the animals that cruise through the property, watching the hawks on high today. You know, like I can just be flabbergasted by natural wonder around me and be completely sober, and there's no electronics necessarily going on or anything. I'm just like, I feel like I'm on mushrooms all the time. It's true. Everything's Technicolor in my world, and I get a little overwhelmed. And I think that's part of why I don't put myself out there, is because, well, I'm concerned about people's opinions of how I look or how I sound, or the critiquing. And I'm absolutely certain that goes back to how my mom is around, limelight, or being the focus of attention, or needing to be the focus of attention. It's like if I'm talking about what has heart and meaning, it's a different animal. But it's hard for me. I don't know if you know this or not. We'll keep this off the record. I had another life for about 10 years where I was, most of what I was doing was a very superficial pursuit. And it wasn't a bad thing, but it got me traveling, and it got me seeing some pretty exciting things of how the world works, and art and design and beauty, and all of these things that I was naturally drawn to. But I think for me, the idea of being on any sort of stage or making like a live video about what I'm experiencing for Facebook or whatever, to me it seems like an undue focus on me, and it feels gratifying, self-gratifying, glorifying, whatever the case might be. But it's I get concerned about the absorption of our society sort of in on themselves. And if I'm on a stage, I'm concerned about selling out, kind of. And that might be it. It just like there might be something that's selling out if I'm Kate. Maybe it's because I created a boutique healing business that's so uniquely my own. I'm so proud of my brand, whatever that is. You know, I love that there's no advertising. People just know about me through, hey, by the way, that thing that. I love that. That feels intimate. That feels warm. That feels like tribe. And the idea of getting technology involved seems like it bastardizes it somehow. And does it really? Because we've all witnessed people through a media format where we've just been in tears, going, "Oh my God, what a beautiful message! What a beautiful message!" So. I know that I have a lot of up-leveling to do in my understanding of what it is that I'm there to do and what my audience is, and this is one of those things that's going to really help me with it, you know. So I find that interesting. When did you first get on stage, and were you the kid that could just get up and go, "My book report," and you just like?
Actually, no.
When did you start feeling different about all that?
That didn't happen until my 30s. Actually.
Yeah.
Me too.
I was
really.
I was in high school. I did music
Some drama.
theater.
Yeah.
Actually, it was so bad for me when I was in high school. I did a Once Upon a Mattress, and in the show Once Upon a Mattress, it's the story of the Princess and the Pea.
Okay.
But it's a musical.
Oh wow.
And it's a wonderful show. But I opened the show singing a song, walking through the audience.
Give us just hum a few bars.
I don't remember anymore. We'll come back to that.
Yeah, okay.
Still not that guy.
Right on.
But anyway, I didn't tell my parents I was in the play until the night before the play. If you can imagine.
Wow.
And I was like, "Yeah, I'm in this play if you want to come see my play." And they were like, "You're in a play? And you have a lead role in the play?" Like, my mom tells us that story, and I go, "Wow, yeah." So
interesting.
it was when it really came full circle in earnest when I was living in Phoenix. My ex-wife actually was so annoyed that I didn't have hobbies, and I still don't. It's a strange phenomenon for me, but something else we can talk about another time. But I don't have hobbies. I don't like to diddle. I'm not a diddler in that way. You know, I mean, I want to do things, but I don't have, you know. So like, anyway.
I'm not a diddler. That's awesome, man. I'm sorry. That's really beautiful. I'm just not a diddler. Never been a diddler. Never wanted to be a diddler.
This is my live skit.
It totally is.
Skit for sure. Anyway, she found a men's barbershop chorus in Phoenix. A competitive chorus. And I've been singing forever in my life. But I really love singing, so I auditioned, and of course I got. And I was a front row guy, and the front row guy is the guys who get to dance and do that because I was good at that too. And then that led to being in a quartet, and I did that for 3 or 4 years, competitively. That was still a little bit of a struggle for me because I sang lead in the quartet, so I drove the boat basically with the other 3 parts. But so that got me in that experience. I've been on stages in front of 10,000 people, and performing in that size. And I performed in L.A. and I performed in where the Ducks play in Portland, and I performed in England. So there's always been that. I mean, I thought I was going to be an actor when I left home. I moved to New York City thinking I was going to do that. And after a year, discovered I didn't have a thick enough skin to deal with any of that at that stage of my life. So when Higher Brain Living came around and I was doing that and then started doing the presentations, everything started to kind of gel, because what I found was that when I was in my truth, I could do anything. I could stand in front of people, I could talk about it.
Right.
Because my clarity about it, you couldn't fuck with that. And you can't. I mean, it doesn't matter, you know. I mean, there's always...
That's an important distinction, I think.
There may be a point where if I convey something in a way that came across as offensive, I can address that, but it doesn't change the truth. It doesn't change what I know.
Indeed.
And if there's something that would help me understand better or know more, I'm equally as willing to have that energy come into the space as well. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So somebody can throw questions at me in the middle of a presentation. Doesn't throw me. It makes me stop and go, let me think about that question. So, and then figure out how to answer the question and again, staying in that thing. So, yeah. And then that sort of builds, it builds on itself, where
it does build on itself.
There's something about that.
These little incremental
being
little
there that makes it easy in a way. I never. I mean, I had clients for years telling me I should write a book. I'm like, what the hell am I going to write a book about?
Clients in what?
My clients.
In Higher Brain Living?
Yeah. Because throughout the course of the process, I would share so many parts
Sure.
of things about my own experience and myself, and you got to do that. I'm like, what am I going to write a book about? I never even was not something that I even considered until it happened.
Yeah.
And that's what it did. It happened. Showed up. Big old download one day, driving down the road. I'm like, oh my God, I guess I'm writing a book.
Nice.
It's really and then
I'll buy one from you.
came that way.
Write a little something in it, and I'll pick it up next time. Seriously, bring it up.
I'll send it to you.
I'll read it.
I think I sent it to you. I already did send it to you, the file, I thought.
You did?
Yeah, because we talked about it the first or second week.
I'm better with what's in front of me, not on the screen. So,
Print it.
all right. So,
But, yeah, guys,
why are we here, kids? I think this is part of why we're here, challenging ourselves to get out of our comfort zones, you know, like just see what other incarnations we can develop in our relative discomfort. I don't know how much I love my comfort. I'm a lazy bastard. I am. I work hard and I put in a good day's work, and I love that when I'm busy and knocking it out of the park in that way. But if I have time to chill, I'll probably take that.
amen to that.
And I also know that I'm a lot more comfortable in my skin than most of the people that are trying to assuage me otherwise. People that are telling me what needs to be done, and like, you know, you need more of this in your life, you need more of that. The people that are telling me that, I don't want to trade places with those.
Well, they can tell you what their experience is.
They can
and
tell what their
works for
experience is.
them, but
Indeed.
that's about as far as it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. I like seeing a big fat mic on my table. I've been thinking about this for quite some time. Take it easy over there. You look fine just as you are, Mike. The holidays did you right.
Should we to a close.
Any final thoughts on why we're here? That anybody's...
My sense is that if there's anything in our consciousness that's on autopilot, anything that hasn't been checked in a while, you know, just like when I hear people say, that's just the way I am, you know, I've been told that since I was a kid, or, you know, I'm Puerto Rican, I'm crazy. I'm like, okay, well, that, I get part of that, but I think that anything that is just a default way for you or me to have any departure from my accountability, our accountability for what we're bringing to the table, is a great place to start. What's on repeat? What keeps going? What keeps any of the story going? Be a hound for discovering where stories are. Where are your stories hiding? And I work with my clients all the time. And what I tell them is, it's like when we start to get a lesson, and I have them imagine, like, okay, they got the lesson, they're vibrating, they're crying, they're out of their body, whatever the case might be. Now I want you to imagine whatever saboteurs might be lying in wait to destroy this progress in your world. And what I like to do is I like to color it periwinkle. That's my favorite color when I was a kid, the periwinkle. It's like a lavender, purple kind of thing. And so...
Crown chakra.
Is it? Oh, wow. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that. And so when I see old tigers that turned out to be paper tigers that I can color periwinkle, when I imagine them popping up and scaring me, it doesn't scare me anymore. It's like, oh yeah, you're the periwinkle tiger. You're part of my cartoon now, right? You're no longer this force that has me reacting in a really staunch way against my own best interest in life. So I think the idea of why we are here begins with being able to pump the brakes on any of the narratives of the stories that we were given and not the ones that we've created for ourselves, would be where I'm at with that.
I like it.
Thanks.
I think ultimately we're here to experience the moment.
Right.
Whatever that is. And the why we're here changes every day because it depends on how much in the moment you are here. And so over time, the why, there's a different, the why I'm here right now is this. This is why I'm here. Because this is creating a joy and satisfaction that I strive for in every now, that I can strive for that. Doesn't mean I get there from here every time, but I strive for it. And so that sort of extrapolates for me to being here. Why are we here? To experience it. All of it. As much of it as we want, or as little as we want, as many times as we want, or as few times as we want, as deeply as we want, or as surface as we want. I don't think it's an open-ended quest. And so for me, like, the choice to see disintegration instead of loss is that kind of perspective.
Yeah.
That was then, but that's not my now. And if I'm still in my then I'm in loss. But if in my now, I can say it's disintegrated because it's no longer needed for me to go where I'm going. Even though I don't know where that is. Or I haven't determined that yet. So there's kind of that continuity thing we talked about way back when. You know, that there's just this continuity that continues. And so my now and my why am I here is to figure out what I'm going to do next. And this is my next. For now.
Dig it. Yeah. That's great. This is my next for now. I like that. That's a great title for a book, by the way.
This is my next for now.
I'll love you forever tonight.
In Joseph Campbell, in some of Joseph Campbell's work, he describes some sacred roles that we play in occupations that we take on. And he talks about the evolution of these occupations and the different categories of them. One being laborer, of which we are not. Been there, done that. Another being merchant, of which we are not. You sell anything? Not really. A product, mainly, right? And merchant, the upper level of merchant leads into politician, which is really fascinating to think that the higher end of that is the political, because they're selling and they position themselves for more of merchant. On another side, you have a teacher, of which we are. Warrior is another category, and warrior priest. The high end of warrior is eventually priest, and I can see myself having traveled that path. So some combination of less of a warrior, more as a priest, and certainly teacher. That's the combination that I'm operating in right now. And so for me, my purpose is to be a teacher of spirituality, of love, of self-acceptance, and to try to model that as best I can. So this thing that we are doing is an aspect of me unlearning what I've learned.
Oh, well said, sir.
And I'm showing up doing it. This is an example of doing that. And you guys choosing to be team players with me is an honor and much appreciated, and it makes it fun as well.
Right.
Why not have some fun in this journey of doing this? And of course, the selfish part is there is I'm blanking on words right now, but there's gratification in sharing information. And if somebody else benefits from something that I have to share,
and just simple testimony,
it feels good.
Absolutely.
If that can make someone else's life a little bit more joyful, or
it's worthwhile,
peaceful, or forgiving, or whatever, okay, I dig that.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to feel guilty for whatever. Nothing negative about enjoying the benefits of being a teacher.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that everything I say is right or accurate. I mean, it's not about that. It's just like, even if, hey, take this little sugar cube and pretend it makes you feel better, and if it makes you feel better and your life is better, then
placebo.
Okay, great.
Let's get it.
It worked.
Yeah.
Who cares if it's medicine or not,
100%.
Well, and how many times have we all experienced, I know I have, I couldn't even count the number of times that all it took was a particular word or collection of 2 or 3 words or a sentence is what catapulted new understanding and change. It wasn't listening for 2 hours to somebody go on. It was that one sentence that he said at 1 minute and 43 that changed everything.
Right.
And it rarely has anything to do with the whole thing. It has to do with that moment of connection where something just clicked. You go, oh, that's what I've been waiting to hear for 10 years.
Yeah.
And then I never listen to it again.
Yeah.
To push this just a little bit further, in order for me to know that what I have to say is relevant and meaningful and maybe even accurate, guess what there has to be? Critics.
Oh, critics.
Critics have to show up and tell me that I'm full of shit. Right? Have to. That has to be a part of this experience. Because if everybody goes, oh yeah, everything he says is
thumbs
absolutely
down. Thumbs
perfect
down.
and right on.
Whoever's listening,
right?
just give us a thumbs down, because that's what we need. That's going to catapult us to the next.
Right.
Right now. The next. Right now.
So right now, I'm inviting that. I'm inviting you've lost it, you've gone over the edge, you're a psycho freak, whatever. I'm inviting that critique into my life from whomever and however it's going to show up, so that I can know. Because the only way that I can really know that what I have to say is true from my perspective, meaningful, beneficial, helpful, I have to know it. I have to know it. And it wouldn't be meaningful and true and relevant and all that if everybody just, everything I said, everybody went, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. You've changed my life. Thank
Jeffrey.
you. You know? Because pretty soon I'd be saying, try eating dog shit. It'll make you feel better, right? And everybody went, oh
Tastes
man,
bad.
I ate some dog shit yesterday, and you know what? I feel so good today. Oh wow, now you got 20 people in the hospital or whatever. And
Yeah.
that's how that would unwind if there or unfold. There have to be critics, so we would know that in order for this to really be tested, there have to be those people that will show up, and they will have to be the people that I love the most, that I respect and admire the most. Would say, "Who are you, dude? What the hell happened to you?"
Yeah.
So that would be likely my mom and dad. It would be some of my mentors. It would be maybe an ex-wife, a son, a daughter, all of the above. Because the stuff that we're talking about is, it's either cutting edge, it's controversial, it's not mainstream, and
yes, please.
That's kind of where I've lived my life.
Me too.
I've only ever lived my
On
life
the fringe,
in that place.
of course. That's why you invited this motley crew into formalized discussions of such.
The fringe element.
Fringe elements.
What I do find interesting about my particular story and how somehow I've arrived at this place of, I don't think what I have to say is going to be well received or respected or would be helpful, is that for the most part, the things I've really thrown myself into, I've done really well at it. For example, I liked to shoot, so I wanted to become a Marine Corps sniper. That's not necessarily an easy thing to go do. And you don't kind of just do it for a little while and then quit, you're kind of
I dabbled in sniperism. I was the sniper-esque kind of guy for a little while, but yeah.
And then the thing about flying, I want to fly fighters for the Marine Corps, and that's not like jumping in a Cessna at Palomar and going for it takes a while to get there, and once you're there, you don't just go, okay, been there, done that, I'm done now, and doing the all-electric off-road race car, that's never been done before, and it's just kind of weird how all that came together, and the Discovery Channel thinking that it was a cool enough project to want to do a documentary. So I know how to do unique, cutting edge, hard, very difficult, commit to it, show up, do it. I know how to show up that way, Then doing the night school thing and getting the education to get the letters behind my name and blah, blah, blah and all that. Treating borderline personality disorder. It's like, who the hell wants to do that? But no, I'll do that.
Can't fix crazy.
I'll take that one on. So I've done hard, challenging, sometimes never been done before things. So now when it comes to this sharing information, being a teacher, spiritual leader, guru, counselor, I actually love public speaking. When I get up in front of a group, something happens to me that there's an energy that shows up.
Oh, big time.
That I'm channeling.
Oh, yeah.
I'm channeling thoughts and ideas and energy, and it's a freaking rush. Mm-hmm. And I watch afterwards if we videotaped it or I listen to it, I'm like, who's that
boy
guy?
Surged.
Exactly.
Where did he get that surge?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or people will come in and tell me, last week when we were talking about this and you said that, and I'm like, you talking to me?
Yeah.
I said that? Yeah. Really? So I know that.
But this is the same guy that doesn't like to be on a stage, but in front of a group. What's the distinction there?
It's not about the stage. I totally dig the stage. Totally dig that. It's just this concept that.
But earlier you were saying that you didn't like being on the stage.
No, I think I was talking about just the concept or the idea that what I have to say isn't going to be helpful.
I see.
Or people aren't going to be interested.
Okay. Thanks.
That's it.
Yeah.
Really. Even though I get paid for it. And even though every time I've done it, it's been well received. And
exactly.
People have booked me again or wanted me to come right. It's just like I've only had nothing but positive confirmation, but that's not enough to change my story.
Yeah.
Or even, let's take it one step farther. What I have to say isn't relevant enough that people will pay me for it. Like, through advertising or through marketing or through whatever, a book, a video, a podcast. It's like I can do it hour by hour. That's it.
I like that distinction.
As I can go.
I can relate to that distinction, that hour by hour thing. Yeah.
And I absolutely know, and God continues to show up, or the universe, or the great white buffalo, there are new concepts that show up in my mind at least 3 or 4 times a year that are new forms of therapy that just keep showing up, that really need to be presented to other therapists to be able to do kind of what is showing up. And I love doing that work. But will I actually register to the Board of Behavioral Sciences and become a continuing education provider and book a hotel and send out the emails and
check me out?
You can make like $10,000 for a weekend.
Yeah.
That's not chump change in my world, and I wouldn't mind doing that once a month or wherever this could lead. If we're doing some kind of spirituality workshops at some point, I would totally dig that. Once a month, we got a weekend gig that we're doing somewhere, and we split it up between the 3 of us, and that'd be great.
Yeah.
Manny, Mo, and Jack, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That would be fun. Cool. I know that if we believe it and create it, there would be people that would show up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I've done that too.
You guys ready to call it a wrap for tonight?
Yep.
Hell of a night.
All right.
Si, senor. You can stop looking at yourself.